Hi guys, so I'm going to be talking about the text that I read, and I apologize for the fan in advance. It's probably a little distracting, but it gets a little hot up here. So the text that I read is a book titled Imagine by Jonah Lehrer, and its goal is to explain how creativity works. And Lehrer starts the book out by saying that creativity serves as a catch-all term for distinct thought processes. So I'm going to kind of elaborate on that. He kind of split the book into two different portions. He talked about individual and collaborative creativity. And so I won't talk this through chapter by chapter because if you read it, you'll notice that it's written more like a textbook explanation on where creativity comes from and how to harness it. So I'm just going to kind of hit on how to harness it. So the book talks about inventions and innovations, like the Swiffer, the sticky note, different songs, the iconic I Heart New York label, cocktails, the Barbie doll, plays, and improv. And so I won't bore you with the logistics of brain activity described in this book, but understand that different parts of the brain work for what I'll call different parts of creativity. And so reviewing this book after I read it, I looked at it as kind of a self-help for how to be more creative. And in short, I'm going to explain kind of how to be more creative. This is kind of my synopsis of the book. He had creativity working in two ways. And since I am sewing a quilt right now, I'm going to explain it in terms of my quilt. So the first way to be creative. If I've run into a problem, which you have to have a problem at first, so you can use creativity to solve it or come up with a new idea. What shapes do I want my quilt facing to be? So when you see the quilt, what do I want it to look like? And if I can think about it, see, right now I have squares, and so I have all these squares, and if I don't know really what I want to cut them as, this is how he kind of describes. So he begins by looking for an answer. The author calls this the moment of insight, like the aha moment. And Lehrer says we should engage our right hemisphere by daydreaming or taking a shower, having fun, allowing new ideas to come from different influences of a happy mind. And so that's one way. And then the second way he described, which is kind of later on in the book, I found more interesting. It seems like the more active way of thinking to me, and I bet most of us can relate to this way better. So say I pick triangles, which I do have triangles cut right here. And so say I pick these triangles, but I'm trying to figure out how to arrange them on my quilt so that I want a certain dimension. So say I want a 6-foot quilt. How many triangles am I going to have to arrange to get there? And so here Lehrer points out that our creativity is somewhat like persistence. So this is when we can buckle down and drink caffeine or take drugs to help us focus on what every match we could run in our brain and think so hard about it until we figure it out. And he says that depression has kind of helped with this in the past with mathematicians or poets trying to write fast or any kind of writer in the past. And so if you have a hard time thinking about this as creativity, like I kind of did, he describes really well later on in the book that if we think back to the aha moment, or what he calls insight, this is how we achieve it. So the first way, you get happy, you get all your thoughts flowing, you have a happy mind, and all of a sudden it comes to you. But the second, the kind of more difficult, is when you know something, it's on the tip of your tongue, but it's not coming to you. So you just kind of have to keep thinking until you hammer it out. And so I thought those were kind of interesting. And just so you know, I'm going to arrange it. So they're going to be in a bunch of different triangles. So anyway, that's kind of fun. But the second part of the book talks about collaboration, where he really just stresses the importance of bouncing ideas off of everyone. He talks about in like Pixar and other places that are inventing new things, innovations, they have an open floor plan. They put bathrooms in the middle of the company so people can mix, people that wouldn't usually mix, they'd come together. And I think it was Google that he talked about how they would hold like kind of like a science fair and you'd get the engineers mixing with the artists, or you get all that mixing of ideas, and that's what really helps new innovations. He also talked about cities, more innovations coming from cities, which he says that since there's so many people and you have so many ideas bouncing off of each other, you lead to more innovations, which is kind of difficult for me to accept because I always lived in a rural area and I consider myself a creative person, but this is the part of the book where he talks more about innovations, and he really kind of displays innovations as creativity, new ideas. And so that's kind of the main points of the book. He makes a lot of good points about the brain and stories and stuff, and so I'm going to elaborate on that further.